Bookmarks. Watercolour bookmarks. They are slightly addictive. Sometimes you want to paint something and you haven't got very long, or maybe you want to try out a new colour combination or a particular technique you've seen and you don't want to put it into a painting, you just want to experiment. Well, a little watercolour bookmark is a lovely project. And of course, you end up with something that is really presentable at the end. You can give as a present or indeed use yourself if you don't read on a Kindle. My name's Liz Chatterton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire. Every week I share a tip, trick or technique I wish I'd known about ages ago. And I thought I'd show you how I made one of these little slices of landscape bookmarks using watercolour and then some pen work and a few sort of acrylic markers. I've waxed them so that they are going to be resilient and none of the colour will come off on a book. And yeah, I've really enjoyed doing them. I've used this little bookmark pad that I got from Hannah Muller, and it is cold pressed paper, it's 100% cotton, and it's already cut to size. It behaves really, really nicely. Just cut a piece of ordinary watercolour paper. These are 5.5 by 20 centimetres, which is 2.2 by 7.9 inches. You need some watercolours. This is a great thing for using up little bits of leftover that you don't want to waste. I really like having a clean border to my little slice of countryside, so a bit of masking tape is a good idea. Once you've done the watercolour, the line work is done with little fine liners. I've got these ones from Ohuhu, so you want them to be waterproof just in case you go back in and add any colour afterwards. So those are really nice. Depending on how big your bookmark is, you probably don't want a very thick line, so probably a 0.2 or a 0.3 will be good if you've just got one pen, I reckon. I've also got these markers, and I'm going to do a proper review of these. These are acrylic markers from Ohuhu, and they are lovely. So I've added opaque lines on top like the sun and the lines in the fields, or just coloured pen, gel pens, those could be nice. If you want to round off the corners, you might have a rounding punch if you do card making or scrapbooking or something like that. That's entirely optional. We'll need a hole punch to put your tassel through. You don't have to put a tassel on, but they are kind of fun. My top tip for making bookmarks is put the hole in the right place. Concentrate while you're doing it. I don't know why I put a hole there. Ridiculous. Anyway, that's my top tip. To finish them, I've used Dorland's wax, which is, well, I'll show you at the end, but you rub it on and it waterproofs the card. So I would suggest fixing it in some way. You could use a spray varnish if you want, but wax is rather nice. Then I got 100 multicoloured tassels for £4.99 off Amazon. So I thought they were a bit of a bargain, and they do make a difference. And look at those great colours. You can use whatever supplies you've got. If you want to put glitter on them, you put glitter on them. If you want to use a stencil, use a stencil. These are great little ways of experimenting with some of your mixed media sort of techniques. I've taped down 2 pieces of paper here. Try and get the edges pretty even and just put your tape down so that we get those nice clean edges. I'm going to start with some sky, green sky, why not? Well, it's sort of turquoisey, and you just put a layer across of whatever colour you want. Then leave a slight gap and put your horizon in. These are very stylised, so you can use whatever colours you want, but what I would suggest is just thinking that in the distance things are going to be smaller and further away. So if you're putting layers of countryside, I would have a few smaller ones in the distance. And I think it's fun to, even though we're leaving gaps, to join them in places so that we do get watercolour doing its watercolour-y thing. We can go back and strengthen things if we want. I'm going to have a larger blue field here, getting a little bit sort of bigger coming towards us, a yellow field, some sort of crop, that's a bit of Naples yellow. So use whatever colours you fancy, freshen it up with a bit of green coming forwards. And then right at the front, let's have some more green. I like how you see how the Naples yellow is pushing into that green. So even though this is a bit of fun, you can still paint it and go back. And oh, look at actually how that green is pushing up into the area above it. I can absolutely turn those into little trees if I want to. And of course you can go back and maybe put in some texture. So I'm just dotting in some clean water into this green so I get some little blooms. That might be quite fun. You don't need to make it overly complicated. Let's do exactly the same here. So this is going to have a bit more of a blue sky, and then let's make this all sort of nice and warm and make this more of a summery one. So I'm going to do some nice crops in the field. So use up some of these. Those merge and touch a little bit. See what happens there. I would try and make the layers not even. Try and make each one just a bit different. Bigger area of green here. For a bit of fun. I don't need to let these dry. And I think it's fun to mix up, say, some line work and some colour. So on this one, I am going to put a nice yellow sun. And I think it's quite fun to maybe pull some of that colour down further. Just to play around and mark make. Just let your imagination wander. See what sort of marks and patterns suggest themselves. Say I would vary them as much as possible and think about landscape because it is sort of inspired by. So, you know, it might be a stony field. In the distance, we might have some trees. You see, these marks are absolutely tree-like, aren't they? So I'm just going to outline those. Do some bigger trees here, I reckon. Some branches. I think it's nice to mix up sort of abstract mark making. You know, these could be the furrows in a field, they could be whatever, and just mix up some things that are fairly representational. You know, those are meant to be trees, with some things that are just marks for the fun of it. Think about things being at the bottom of the page being closer and therefore bigger and maybe more detailed than things that are far away. I fancy maybe putting a little house in this one. If you haven't used these acrylic markers before, you sort of push them up and down. It's a sort of little pump action to get the paint flowing if they're new. They are, I say, pretty opaque, which is good. And then once it's dry, you can put stuff on top of it, which is good. Yeah, if you've got anything like a stencil, you could create patterns. Just use ordinary gel pens as well if you happen to have any that you fancy using. This one's going to have a purple sun. Why not? Purple and yellow are complementary colours, so they always look great against each other. Might do some ears of wheat or something. Of course, you can bridge the lines and join bits together, but I think generally you'll want to keep it fairly sort of stylised. When you're happy with what you've done, and it really is entirely up to you how much you do, just carefully remove the tape. Do it carefully, just in case it ends up ripping your paper, which would be very annoying. Best tip I can give you is pull it away from the paper, and if it starts to rip, then use a little, actually I think that has, use a hairdryer and that will just melt the glue and you'll be able to remove it a lot more easily. If it's seeped, if any of the paint has seeped under your tape, you've got two options. You can either try and lift it just using a little short flat brush, so you can sort of tickle the pigment and then dab it away, hopefully, and that might be enough. You could just live with it. You could make sure it's totally dry and use a very sharp scalpel and scrape it away, or you could disguise it using your white acrylic marker and just touch it up, and no one's going to look that closely. So there's our little slices of landscape, and now we need to finish them off. So if you want to, you can round off the corners, and then we can put a hole in the centre, being a lot more careful than I was on that other one, where you want it to go. We need to think about finishing it. So what I would do is use a bit of Dorland's wax, which is wax medium like this. If you have any sensitivities, you can apply this with gloves, or you can use a cloth and just apply it with a cloth. Put a really thin layer on, front and back is what I would do. You let it dry, and then it dries hard, It won't be at all sticky if that's a worry. And you can then actually polish it, buff it, just to get a little bit of shine on it. Of course, if you want to, you could sign them maybe. Just initial it on the back, your masterpiece. That's up to you. And then we need to select the right colour tassel. I think maybe a turquoise one for that one. And you just pop it through the hole and loop it through, and there you go, that's your finished bookmark. It's just a bit of fun, but you can make them as colourful or as monochrome as you want. Makes a lovely present for a friend, for that person who's always got their nose in a book.